You know, some stories are just so wild, so far beyond anything we think is possible, that they can only be told when the storyteller is already on their way out. Today, we're going to dive into a manuscript left behind by a dying man. It's this incredible story about a voyage not just to the North Pole, but right through it into a whole new world hidden inside our own. It's a tale that was sealed by a deathbed promise, and boy, does it start with a haunting farewell.
Think about that for a second. I was left alone with the dead. These are the words that kick off this whole unbelievable account. It's such a chilling phrase, and it really sets the stage for a story that's all about incredible discovery, but also profound, devastating loss, and a secret that would end up costing a man absolutely everything. And like a lot of strange tales, this one gets its start in the dead of night.
So the guy who wrote all this down, Willis George Emerson, he presents this whole thing as a deathbed confession he personally witnessed. He gets called to the home of a man named Olaf Jansen, a 95-year-old Norseman. Now, Emerson knew him as this quiet, kind of scholarly neighbor who was really into the old gods, Odin and Thor. But on his deathbed, Jansen reveals he's been guarding a secret way older and way stranger than his ancient faith.
Can you imagine getting a note like this at 2 in the morning? Am ill unto death. Come. Just 4 words, but Emerson said the call felt imperative. He had to go. And when he got there, Olaf Jansen was definitely fading fast. But his mind? His mind was on fire with a story he had kept locked away his entire life. A story he just had to tell before he joined his ancestors in what he called the Great Sleep.
So Jansen hands Emerson this whole package. It's got his life's work inside, crude but detailed maps, strange drawings, and this thick handwritten manuscript. And he makes Emerson swear a solemn promise that he'll share this story with the world. Jansen believed that Emerson would be safe, that he wouldn't suffer the same fate he did. He literally said, "They will not put you in irons, nor confine you in a madhouse, because you are not telling your own story, but mine." Yeah, a story that had already cost Jansen everything he had.
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to rewind. We're going all the way back to 1829. Olaf is just a 19-year-old kid, and he's heading out with his father on what they think is just another fishing trip. Turns out it was a trip that would take them completely off every known map on the face of the earth.
So picture this. They're just simple fishermen from Stockholm. They take their little fishing sloop and head north, way past the usual grounds, into these super dangerous, ice-filled waters around a place called Spitsbergen. But then, from this remote island called Franz Josef Land, they make a choice that changes everything. They decide to just keep going, to point the boat due north and sail right into a complete and total blank on the map. And this image here really gives you a sense of the sheer danger they were in. Jansen describes it as this maze of ice, like an endless succession of crystal palaces, of massive cathedrals and fantastic mountain ranges. It was a death trap. Any bigger ship would have been crushed to splinters, but their little boat was nimble, and they were expert sailors, so they managed to thread their way through, pushing farther and farther north, into the complete unknown.
And this is where things get really weird. This is where the laws of nature just seem to, well, break. The farther north they went, the warmer it got. I mean, that makes zero sense, right? They even found a little inlet on the coast of Franz Josef Land that was covered in green plants. And straight ahead, to the north, where there should have been a solid wall of polar ice, there was nothing but clear, open ocean.
Now, you might be thinking this is just pure fantasy, but here's where it gets interesting. The manuscript actually tries to back this up, pointing to real-world explorers who saw similar weird stuff. It brings up the famous explorer Fridtjof Nansen, who apparently described sailing north for miles and miles through an open sea where there shouldn't have been one. He kept seeing this dark sky ahead, which sailors know means even more open water. It completely defied all logic.
So why on earth would they risk it all and sail into this impossible sea? Well, it's because Olaf's father, Jens, was a true believer in the Old Norse gods. He genuinely believed in the ancient legends of a beautiful land beyond the north wind, the place where the gods came from. For him, this warm, open sea wasn't some strange anomaly. It was a sign. It was a divine invitation. He turned to his son, Olaf, and asked him, "Are you willing to go with me and explore?" Olaf said yes, and just like that, their fishing trip became a quest straight out of mythology. At this point, they'd left the world of maps and logic far behind. They weren't just exploring the Arctic Ocean anymore. They're about to become travelers to an entirely new world, a land of truly impossible scale.
According to Jansen's story, they sailed their tiny boat right over the Great Curve at the top of the planet. And suddenly, they weren't on the outside of the Earth anymore. They were on the inside. Their compass just spun around uselessly. For days, they just drifted on this calm inland sea, lit by this strange, constant, gentle light that seemed to be coming from somewhere up ahead.
The world they found themselves in, well, it was just beyond anything they could have imagined. There were forests of these massive, towering trees. Huge, strange animals were just roaming around freely, and everything was overwhelmingly green and alive. And then they were discovered by a race of people that Olaf describes as calm, gentle, friendly, oh, and a cool 12 feet tall.
And get this, these weren't just giants. They were practically immortal, like the patriarchs from the Old Testament. Olaf claims these people lived for centuries, some of them reaching 600, even 800 years old. They lived in this peaceful, advanced civilization, totally untouched by all the stuff we deal with in the outer world. No war, no disease, none of it.
So you got to be asking, what's power in this hidden world? Where is all this constant light and gentle warmth coming from? Well, the giants gave them the answer. They just pointed their attention to the very center of their world, the very center of the Earth.
This is what Olaf saw. It wasn't a blazing sun like ours. It was this huge electrical thing, a mammoth ball of dull red fire that just glowed with a soft, steady light. It bathed the entire inner world in this perpetual, comfortable daylight, with none of the scorching heat of our sun and none of the pitch black of our night. The giants had a name for it, of course. They called this inner sun the Smoky God. For them, it was literally the throne of the Most High, the source of all life in their world, and they treated it with a deep religious reverence. They explained that it was held perfectly in the middle of the inner world by gravity, acting like the beating heart of their entire civilization. Olaf and his father ended up living there peacefully for 2 whole years, learning the language and the culture.
But you know how these stories go. Even paradise can't always hold you forever. The pull of home is strong. Eventually, they decided to leave, but their trip back wouldn't lead to fame or celebration. Oh no, it would lead to tragedy, to disbelief, and to a curse that would haunt Olaf for the rest of his life.
So they decided to leave through the South Pole this time, but the exit was anything but peaceful. A massive storm hit them, trapping them between these gigantic icebergs. One of them slammed right into their boat, and in all the chaos, Olaf watched completely helpless as his father, Jens, was swept into the freezing black water. And just like that, he was gone. Olaf was now completely and utterly alone.
And this is where the story just gets heartbreaking. He gets rescued by a Scottish whaling ship, but his relief doesn't last long. The second he tells the captain his incredible story about the inner world, the giants, the Smoky God, the captain says he's a madman and throws him in chains. When he finally makes it back to Stockholm, he makes the mistake of telling his uncle, hoping for some help. Instead, his own family turns on him. They have him declared insane, and he gets thrown into a madhouse.
28 years. For almost 3 decades, Olaf Jansen was locked away from the world. And what was his crime? Telling the truth about what he saw. He had to endure, in his own words, long, tedious, frightful years of suffering, all because what he believed was the greatest discovery in human history was just brushed off as the ravings of a lunatic. When he finally got out, he was an old man. His spirit was pretty much broken. He learned a very, very hard lesson. He went back to being a fisherman, built a quiet life for himself, and eventually moved to America. And he never ever spoke of the world within, the land of giants, or the Smoky God again. Not until that very last night, when he called the author to his bedside to finally unburden his soul.
So that leaves us with the big question, right? The manuscript that Emerson published is packed with these fringe scientific theories, references to other explorers, and it's written with this really sincere, earnest tone that's honestly hard to just dismiss. So what was it? An incredibly detailed piece of fiction? The genuine delusion of a man who was shattered by losing his father at sea? Or could it possibly be a true story? An actual secret history of a world that exists right under our feet, just waiting to be found again? The old Norseman didn't live to give us the answer. All he left us was the story.